After swearing off pattern testing for over 10 years, I finally saw something that I really wanted badly enough to go through all the work to do pattern testing, and with a designer I knew I would have a positive experience with. Today I'm going to tell you all about the Waterlily top by Olga Poltava, my experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly. As always, I have a lot to say about the pattern test, the garment itself, the final pattern instructions, and the yarn choice, because I really didn't enjoy the yarn at first. So let's talk about all of those things, and you can decide for yourself if this Waterlily top is something that you want to crochet for your very own.
Stitch is gonna stitch, we don't miss a loop. Pull that thread tight, join the crochet troop.
As you may or may not have seen in a recent video, I mentioned how I have sworn off pattern testing for over 10 years, so it might seem kind of weird that I would just dive right back in out of nowhere. Interestingly enough, that wasn't my goal at all this year. I didn't have any plans on getting back into pattern testing at all, simply because the way that I approach pattern testing can be a lot of work. But earlier this year, I had reviewed Olga's basic sock pattern, and given all of my feedback, when she reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in creating this top, I think I even commented on her video where she was showing her design process for a top that is very similar to this. When she emailed me and said, hey, would you be interested in pattern testing? And I was like, well, no brainer. So in the back of my mind, I'm already picking out yarns that I'm planning on using for this, and she sent me the yarn, which I had never experienced before, and I thought that was really cool. So I don't know that I would have necessarily picked this blushy pink color, and not to say that I don't like pink. Obviously, if you've seen anything recently, I've actually been in a very like pinkness mood, but I probably would have picked a little something different just because I have gotten so much pink recently. But I think this is a pretty universally flattering color. It's a very neutral blushy pink, so I was totally fine with that, and obviously she's paying for the yarn, so who am I to argue about what color I'm going to get or not get? And obviously she's seen my videos, and if she thought that this would have looked horrible on me, she wouldn't have sent me the pink. I think it looks great on me. I've already gotten several compliments. I've worn this a few times, and we'll go into all of that. As far as the pattern test itself, I do approach this very seriously. I have been crocheting for somewhere around 38 years at this point. I was taught when I was 5. Also, the other thing that I don't think I've ever mentioned on this channel, I don't know why it just didn't occur to me, but the other thing that qualifies me to look at some of these patterns is I was actually trained as a paid writing tutor, and my specialty was in technical writing. Now, this clearly isn't a scientific paper, but there's a lot of math, there's a lot of just very detailed things that when I look at it with a critical eye, that's how I can pick out what sorts of things could be clearer or stated differently, or even just visually more pleasing and easier for the end user, the crocheter like myself. All that to say, I was looking at this with a very critical eye, and again, maybe I, as a pattern tester, take this way too seriously. I personally don't think so. The designer trusted me with my expertise to give feedback. Now, as you can imagine, it is up to each individual designer whether or not they like the feedback, if they're going to take the feedback. I also try to be very cognizant of how I give feedback, in that if it were me, this is what I would do, or I would put in comments like consider and then stating something a different way, or adding brackets, or any of those little detailed things that when I looked at it with a critical eye, those were the things that jumped out to me. Now, I also, because I came from a technical writing background, the advice that was given to me is look at it as though it's the first time you're seeing it. Meaning, if I pulled someone off the street and gave them, the instructions, could they follow it? So I had to look at this as, if I have done the basics of crocheting, could I follow along? And I think even the raw pattern that I received, largely, I think an adventurous beginner could actually tackle this pattern. She did state that this is an intermediate pattern, and I could see that. There are, there's construction, there's seaming, There's things that I could definitely see this being on, I would say, the lower end of intermediate. So if you've been crocheting for a little bit and you're looking to push your skill level, I think this would be the perfect pattern to do that, because again, the raw pattern itself that I received before any edits, you know, a lot of my critique was I felt like it was nitpicky. I didn't feel like there were any glaring errors or glaring inconsistencies. Now that said, I also know that she had already written the pattern and had a technical editor look over this. So in my mind, I'm just using the last little bit of just consumer eyes in a way of, if I'm using this, what's going to make it easiest for me. The experience overall was very positive. I received the yarn, I think it hit my mailbox on a Saturday, and then I couldn't actually get started on it for almost a full week. Olga didn't give me any timelines or anything, and even in her video release, she even said, hey, take your time, because she was so kind to shout out my channel and, you know, that I had given all this feedback. I think it was positive. Had she put a timeline on it, I think giving someone like 3 weeks to a month on this top would be more than sufficient, and that's just in the off chance that really I got stuck on something that wasn't clear or something really needed to be worked out, which in this case it did not, in my opinion. That would have given that buffer time to go back and forth and do more edits and make sure it's absolutely as ironed out as possible. So I believe her other pattern tester, Jennifer over at Cinnamon Stitches, she made hers in a week, which I think I could have. If I pushed, I could have done this in a week. That's awesome for her that she got it done in a week. I don't remember what size she made. I know it is one of the larger sizes. That is one thing I will say. There are 11 sizes and also instructions on how to make any further adjustments. So, world's your oyster on if you really need to go past the 5 or 6X, which, you know what? It's an easy to modify pattern. I could easily see that being the case, but having 11 sizes is absolutely amazing. I made mine in about 2 weeks' time, between starting it on like a Sunday, working on it after work throughout the week. There was a couple evenings I wasn't feeling so hot or wasn't up to crocheting and just, you know, didn't work on it. So working at I don't want to say leisurely pace, because I was like motivated to finish it. And so I don't want to say even pushed myself, but I would say as a casual crochet project, getting this done in 2 weeks was like no problem. Am I going to just jump right back into pattern testing as much as I used to? Honestly, probably not, because as much as I love Olga and I'm so glad to have her as a new crochet friend in the community, there's just so much in my queue. And actually it's kind of funny because I was just cleaning out my Ravelry queue and there was something that I had saved from Olga like ages ago. So I was like, I don't know who Olga is, back in March when I found the whole drama stuff. But it turns out that I was saving her patterns anyway. So I have a lot that I want to make both in crochet and in knit. So it would have to be something like this that I really, really, really want to make. I am also super happy to always support and purchase patterns. That doesn't bother me at all. So the final written pattern, I actually just put in my last 2 little comments this morning on a Google Docs version that she had sent me. And honestly, it's really good. There's one tiny grammatical mistake that I don't even want to say what it is because you may not even catch it. So I'm just going to leave it. And then there was one other thing. Oh, it was on swatching. So what I liked is that she included a photo of how to actually measure the repeats and what kind of measurements that you're going to get gauge. And I thought that was like fabulous, but there wasn't like individual instructions to make a swatch separately, which I preferred simply because I made one of the larger sizes. I didn't want to get too far into it and have to like keep ripping back or struggle to get gauge, because rarely do I ever get spot on gauge anymore. I'm really glad I chose to do this swatch, and why this is a perfect illustration as to why it's important to do that swatch, especially with a stitch pattern I'm not super familiar with. I will tend to either do these first couple of rows way too loose, as you can see here, or conversely, I'll get way too snug on my gauge. So I know a lot of crocheters and knitters throw caution to the wind, and gauge will either happen or it won't happen. I would have gotten lucky in the sense that the overall gauge would work out well, except that this bottom is so loose, these first couple of rows. So I did make sure I measured closer to this top here. I think the pattern is interesting enough to not get boring, but also easy enough to internalize. So in full disclosure, I was able to start watching TV after I got going, and as long as I just kind of paid attention every so often to what I was doing, I felt like this, even though this is slated as an intermediate pattern, if you do have that intermediate or advanced level, this will be a relatively easy pattern so far from what I can tell. And granted, again, I'm just doing the gauge swatch. I haven't gone into all of the other construction, which that might be where things get a little bit more intermediate on this pattern. Usually I am on the looser side. It just so happens that I got gauge on this with the exact hook size that she recommended. And the caveat to that is, with the hook size, be very, very, very careful, because I went to grab a Furls crochet hook in the sizes that she recommended, and they were off by anywhere between 0.25 and 0.5 millimeters, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but will add up very quickly in your garment, or subtract very quickly in your garment. So that is something to be very careful of. So I did have to switch back to my Boyer hooks, which is probably also why I feel like I took a lot longer to complete this. I might have been able to do this in a week had I not had to take like hand breaks because I was using a not ergonomic hook. And that is not on Olga at all. Honestly, even if she would have told me ahead of time which hook sizes, I probably would have automatically assumed that I had those in the Furls hooks, because I have most Furls hooks sizes at this point. So that was just one of those slight nuances, and it is what it is. I'm very happy with the end result, and I didn't kill my wrist. I was responsible and took a decent amount of breaks for the most part. So speaking of sizing, I did choose to make the size 7 after measuring myself and just making sure that made sense. She did say the fullest part of your bust, which is very helpful, because sometimes it's this upper bust is what you're supposed to measure. So I thought that was very helpful that she said, no, you're absolute, like the fullest part of your chest area. So that was super helpful. I probably might have been able to argue into the size 6, but I wanted it to be comfortable and have this like loose blousiness. So I think the 7 was like perfection. If you're interested in my measurements, I don't remember what they are off the top of my head. I want to say my full bust was 47 inches. And for reference, I am about 5'11". I did not add any length to this top whatsoever. I just left it as is because I wanted it to be, I don't want to say cropped, but I wanted it to hit. I didn't feel like I needed to add length to make it like tunicky and stuff like I do for a lot of my garments. So right now, depending on the brand, I am running about a 16 or 18 US women's, and my bra size currently is a 42 triple D, 44. I want to say it's a 42 triple D. If I'm wrong, I will make sure I put it up here somewhere. I know that might be TMI for some people, but for someone who is my size or close to my size and my proportions, that's something that might be helpful to you to see if you like how this fits. So the end result, I'm very happy with. The only thing I might do is I might pull out this neckband. I don't typically do a whole lot in it. I know this isn't like a true crew neck, but I don't know. I don't normally wear necklines quite this high. Maybe I'll leave it just because it does add something different to my closet. The only modification, actually, The only modification I made whatsoever was the stitch count for the sleeve ribbing. I made exactly the same width as the neckline. There was a slight difference. It's mentioned in the pattern. Personally, I knew it would bother me for these two not to match, even though, would anyone else really notice? No. But those are like the silly little things that I would notice. And also, like, look at her pattern, and if you like it that way, leave it. Like, absolutely leave it. What I think I like most about this top is I think it is pretty universally flattering and can be styled in so many ways. We all made this blushy pink version, and it looks totally different on how we've styled ourselves. I typically have worn this with a black camisole underneath. Today, I went with a teal just for funsies. You could also certainly get a blush pink or a whatever matches your skin tone nude camisole would also be an option. I actually was planning on running to Kohl's and grabbing a blushy pink that would go underneath it, except that they were out of my size, so I don't have that option to show you in styling. I think this can easily be dressed up or dressed down, and if you look at Olga's style, if you look at Jennifer from Cinnamon Stitches, her style and my style, we have completely different styles. That's, I mean, a no-brainer. If you watch all three of our channels, first of all, thank you. I'm sure they thank you as well. But we have very different, distinct styles in how we do things and how we wear things. And yet somehow this top totally works for all of us because it can be styled in so many ways. You could dress this up, dress this down. Probably could have done some jewelry, except that I'm not going to go ahead and put a necklace on now and have it, kill my microphone and your ears at this point. But there's, I don't know, a lot you could do with it. Again, I'm probably, well, now the more I'm looking at it, maybe I will leave the neckline, especially because I already want to, okay, this is another testament for how good this pattern is. I already want to make at least 2 more versions of this and do some other modifications. I've already swatched for some of those, and so I guess that's a good segue into the yarn, and we'll talk about other yarn options after I talk about the Alize Cotton Gold that was sent to me and is recommended for this pattern. I had never worked with Alize ever, I don't think, in my life, or at least if I have, it's been a very long time, so it fell out of my head. Now, when I first got it, I was like, oh, cotton acrylic blend, okay, fine. Initially, in my mind, when I volunteered to pattern test, I was thinking I would use my my linen blend. It's the Classic Elite Firefly, which is discontinued, so obviously, like, she couldn't recommend that as a reasonable, like, yarn because you can't get it. That said, it was in my stash, so I just wanted to try it in a linen or linen blend and see how it would work up. But I'm not unhappy with the cotton gold, Alize Cotton Gold. So initially I just wasn't sure. I think some of my frustrations on this yarn in particular was working with it. Now, Jennifer had mentioned in her video that she felt like it dried out her hands. I personally didn't feel that experience. However, I'm in Northeast Ohio. It's been humid as crap since, I don't know if there was ever a day this year so far that wasn't humid since it stopped being winter and snowing. And even then, who knows? Anyway, so I personally did not notice anything with my hands. I'm not in a dry climate at all. If you've ever been to Ohio, you understand. So working with it was perfectly fine. It's not, I don't think it felt particularly soft. I didn't feel like it was particularly scratchy. It was just a good middle of the road yarn that I could tell was going to have some structure. And, well, you can kind of see how it drapes. And we'll get into that also in a little bit. So my frustration with the yarn was not about the dryness of it. It's almost worse that Olga bought it for me because it's like, it was her money that she used to send me yarn. And I have to assume that I got a terrible batch because neither of them mentioned this as an issue in their videos. And obviously Olga has made several of these. The first ball that I got, I had 2 factory knots and they were not that far apart. And so that was really frustrating. And shortly after that second factory knot, there was this like really dirty spot. I don't think it got captured very well when I tried to get video of it, but it's there. It probably washed out by now because I've already washed this twice because I've worn it several times already. That was really disappointing on the first ball. And then it just continued from there. The yarn kept like sticking to itself because I like a center pull ball. And so at first I thought, well, maybe it's that first ball. Continued to work with the skein, the next skein, as if, you know, I was pulling that center pull out. It was much of the same where I was constantly getting like yarn barf tangles. Just, it was so frustrating for me. And also, again, more factory knots. I think only one ball did not have a factory knot at all. That first one had at least 2. So not great. And I know factory knots are just a thing that can happen. I just, for the price point of this yarn, was disappointed in how many I was experiencing for one batch of yarn. It was one 4-pack of, you know, they were all clearly made to go together and that dye lot. And so that was really frustrating. A couple of quick points to wrap up the yarn discussion is that I did on that 4th and final ball go ahead and put it on the ball winder, which wasn't the easiest to wind on the ball winder, but it did make a huge difference in how easy it was to crochet out of the ball. So that might be something to consider if you start experiencing that really tough yarn barfy situation with this yarn. The other thing is she had an estimate for the amount of yarn that it should take, and I do believe that it was almost spot on with a little bit of wiggle room. And the way I could tell was I just simply weighed the garment, and it was pretty darn close to the 3.4 skeins of yarn that she had kind of projected out that it would take. So if you're not sure and it's one of the 0.9 or whatever, or like just under a full amount of skeins, so like if it's saying 3.9 skeins, I don't know, I might almost buy a 5th skein just for security's sake, and that might be a me issue. So it just really depends. I came in a little bit under, but just on the off chance, if you were not sure if your gauge is going to be spot on, I just wanted to throw that out there as something to consider. But again, do what makes sense for you. Obviously, the other thing you could do is maybe remove 1 or 2 stitches from that bottom ribbing just for that little added security if you don't want to buy that extra like safety security ball of yarn. I get it. Sometimes it sucks to have like that whole ball left over or to only barely go into it. So that might be another option, is just short the ribbing by like 1 or 2 stitches overall, like around, and then you would probably be totally fine. I think initially I thought this was like a $4 or $5 yarn when I looked on Amazon, and maybe that was the case, but it is like averaging about $8 a ball. So at that point, I would not expect stuff like that to constantly be an issue. There was also another dirty spot, and luckily as I was working with it, it just happened to land on the reverse side somewhere on this ball band, and it seemed like an ink spot or something that probably, I haven't inspected this yet. I don't know that it actually came out in the wash, but yeah, so I was conflicted because I'm like, it's bad enough when it's my own money. To me, it's like, I don't know why, but to me, it's worse when someone else spends their money and they think they're like gifting you or doing you a favor, and then it's just not what you want at all. And so hopefully that was just my experience in a one-off situation. Now, that said, I've already mentioned this has gone through the washer twice, both on delicate and on permanent press, because one of the times I forgot to switch it from permanent press to delicates, and this held it up super well. I did, because of the lacy nature of it, put it in a lingerie bag and zipped it up and everything just to make sure it wasn't going to catch on anything else in the wash, because yes, I did wash it with other like color things because I really needed to see how this was going to hold up. This is probably about the 4th time I've worn it. So as you can tell, like I don't see any major pilling or anything under my arms, which I would expect by now. Oh, there's one of my mistakes. So I did notice, yeah, that was the only mistake that I have found so far. The fact that this survived a much more harsh wash than I meant to put it in. And I don't know about you, but I can barely tell that there was any wear on this. I also forgot to mention that I have not put this yarn through the dryer. I have only laid it flat to dry. It took just about a day to dry out in normal conditions. Well, as normal as it's going to be this time of year in Ohio. So just keep that in mind. It probably would be fine on a low dryer cycle. I just personally didn't feel the need to go that far because I had the time to wait to just let it air dry. So that was an incredibly redeeming factor in that I would give this yarn another chance. Would it be my top choice, or am I going to go run to Amazon right now and get more? No. But at the same time, I would use this again because it is so well wearing. And again, at this point, I would have expected that I would have gotten some pilling under here or where my seatbelt runs. And none of that. So I'm hoping that like the dirt spots and the excessive factory knots were just a random one-off situation and that nobody else has had to deal with this. If you're interested in working with this and factory knots don't bother you, by all means, I'm going to make sure her link to Amazon is down below so that Olga gets all the credit for recommending this yarn because it did turn out beautiful at the end of the day. And, you know, normally when I have those bad experiences, it does kind of, it does make me sometimes put that like, energy into whatever I've made, and then you're less likely to reach for it if you're feeling kind of like, I remember that experience not being so great, but it's worn so well. Many people have complimented me on this already, whether at work or at a knit and crochet night that I attended in Bethesda, Maryland at Second Story Knits. Go check it out. That was a super fun little side trip that I did. So this has traveled with me to Maryland, and I think it's a really great top. It can be styled in so many different ways. That said, if this yarn isn't speaking to you, I did make swatches in several other types of yarn. Oh, another thing I will note is that because this isn't this is a cotton acrylic blend, it does have that nice well-wearing quality, but like the cotton doesn't feel like it's like weighing on me, because sometimes cotton can do that. It just feels like, I don't know. So the acrylic is helping keep some of that bounce to the stitches and the structure. So I thought that was nice. Oh, the other thing is this does have some seaming, which I think is also important for a type of yarn that will tend to want to drape a little bit more because it adds that structure and gives this blousiness back into it. Otherwise, I think it would just really probably have more of a propensity to kind of just hang, which is not good. Actually, unless that's like what you want. So if you wanted to use another yarn, I did go ahead and already swatch in the linen blend that I mentioned, which unfortunately is no longer available. I actually looked around just about everywhere and I could not find something in this sport weight yarn weight that is like a similar blend. Not at Michael's, Hobby Lobby, or Walmart. I guess I wouldn't expect it to be at Walmart, but I did check there because why not? I think the closest I found was on Premier site. I've already forgotten the name of the yarn, so that's unfortunate. I did the linen blend. I did what else have I used? I did an acrylic, so I had a ton of sport weight acrylic from this Knit Picks that I bought on clearance, and that will be the next one that I make. Oh my gosh. Oh, Trubu, Lion Brand Trubu, which I think I would have a hard time getting gauge because it is a little bit thicker, I feel like. Also, as pretty as it is, I don't know that I would recommend True Boot for the purpose of if you are a right-handed crocheter, because I found it to be particularly splitty. So if you're a lefty, it might be a great option. Or if splittiness doesn't bother you, go for it. I just wanted to put that in there. It did work up very nicely. It was just a little bit of a hassle to make just that little bit of a swatch. So I think I would get frustrated trying to do a full garment out of the True Boo. The next version that I'm planning on making is going to be out of the like corally orangey acrylic that I have. And I think I'm going to make it more of a boat neck because I only have one other boat neck in my closet and I do like it, except that, you know, it's actually hard to find good boat neck stuff. So that's the beauty of learning to crochet or knit, is you can do whatever you please. And you know, once you learn the basics. The other thing is I'm going to extend the ribbing up so that it's going to look a lot more like her top that was in the like design process video. So I'm hoping to do that for a fall garment because I think doing that in that orangey corally color will lean obviously kind of fall. And this is a good transition piece because it's not particularly warm outside. It's not particularly cold outside. I think this is a great transition piece. You could do this spring, summer, or fall, and obviously whatever you want to make it in. I did not swatch in wool because, I don't know, it just feels silly to do something this open in a wool. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I just don't have any wool that really spoke to me and said, hey, this might make a great Waterlily top. So that's a possibility. I would be curious to know if you would be interested in doing a crochet along of this top from Olga Poltava. She did say that she is going to give us a discount code on her pattern. That was another thing I meant to mention is I felt like as I was working this up, somewhere between $7 to $11 for the pattern in my mind would be extremely fair. It is currently, as of the time of filming, $9.99 US. I think that's super fair. It gives her that opportunity to go ahead and discount it for us. I'm also going to say, if you can swing it, just pay the full price. Honestly, it's so worth it. And again, if I'm going to make 3 of these, that's like $3, a little over $3 a pattern, $3 per garment for the pattern. And you can make as many as you want. This would also be a super, especially on the smaller size, easily giftable. It's one of those things that would like be like a wow gift, but not be so daunting or involved as a blanket or anything like that. So that's something to consider. Now, as far as her tutorial video, I thought it was very good. If you are using that size 1, could you actually make this whole garment just by watching her tutorial? Absolutely. She did include links for the tutorial as well as one specialty stitch in case the instructions are at all unclear. It's one of those specialty stitches that I knew what she meant and I can just do it, but I can also understand, especially if you're on the advanced beginner side, if you've never actually seen it worked up, you might want that little tutorial, and it is worth double checking. Could you also do the traditional version of that stitch instead of the specialty version? Yes, I don't think you would get as nice of a result, but it's in somewhere that would go in the seam, so you probably wouldn't even notice it at the end anyway. The other thing I also appreciated about her tutorial is that she does give a few more options for this bottom edge treatment. So if you don't want it to like suck in and be blousy, you could ignore that and do one of the other bottom edge treatments. So I thought that was really cool, and I might do that on one of them. Maybe. I will say probably the worst part of this is the bottom ribbing band is your last step, and especially if I'm going to do one with a wider ribbing band, because it's like, okay, I'm almost done. It almost feels like it's the ribbing that never ends, even though I don't normally mind doing crochet ribbing. I think that would also be a really cool thing to try. Maybe I'll do that on the orange one, is to pick up and knit the ribbing. I don't know. I just enjoy mixing crochet and knitting whenever I can, and that seems to usually be one of the simplest ways to do it, is by changing from a crochet ribbing to a knit ribbing. And so that might be something fun. I think you could even do this top completely without any of the ribbing. It's just an option, as you can see on my try-on. That was a lot to say about this pattern test experience, the top itself, the final results, the yarn. I think we got all of it from Olga Poltava, the Waterlily tee, and I hope you at least consider making it and supporting her. Like I said, I think this is a universally flattering shape. Of course, I'm biased because I made it and I think it looks good on me, and I'm not a small person. So the fact that this looks great on several sizes is a testament to her level of detail. Again, I think Jennifer mentioned something about the sleeve opening. I would agree with that. I think it's perfect for my size. It's not too snug, but it's not too like droopy or gross or anything. And if you're not quite ready to dive into a top, or this just isn't your style for whatever reason, I will say her socks still make a great little crochet project in general to have on hand, in particular for on the plane. So if you want to see my review on her basic sock pattern, check it out right here. And as always, I really enjoyed hanging out with you today, and I cannot wait to visit with you in the next one. Bye!
Spinning art from strings with style and flair.